Since I am at this point, I wanted to go over how I make a quilt sandwich. And a quilt sandwich is just the quilt backing, the batting, whatever you're using as batting, in between, and then the quilt top. So this is going to be my quilt back. This is going to be my quilt top. And what you want to start with is by turning your quilt back right side down. And so what that means is just the side that you want to see should be facing the ground, and I'll show you in a second. So this is what it should look like. The seams are facing you. And that kind of makes sense because once you put the quilt batting on, you'll put the quilt top right side facing up, and there you go, your quilt sandwich. But first, the quilt back facing down, and then I'm gonna get out some painter's tape and I'm gonna tape it to the Okay, so some good old painter's tape, just something that will hold your quilt down but won't ruin it, is helpful. And I start taping. I also want to mention that I don't always trim down my quilt completely. I just pieced scrap strips together from the back, and I don't always cut it down. I just make sure that the quilt back is bigger than the quilt top, and I've already squared off the quilt top, which is just making sure all the sides are straight. So after I quilt it together, I'll just trim the back down after that. So also when I do this, you can see little bits of tape around here. I like to pull it tight a little bit, but I don't like to stretch it out. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to warp the fabric, but you want it tight enough so that, you know, there's not like weird wrinkles and stuff like that when you quilt it. Okay, so that's the quilt back all taped down. You can see it's pulled tight enough. I'm really one for, I guess I'm kind of a lazy quilter. I'm one for that stuff that's good enough. I am not a perfectionist by any means. It's gonna quilt out. Like, you don't have to get it all super tight and straight. And it's also fabric, so this is the game. You know what I mean? It's gonna move. So as you quilt, then you can take your pins out if you pin baste and like let the fabric shift, and it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. Okay. So then I take my batting, and I actually love batting because you can kind of just like stretch it to the way you want it to look, which is awesome. So I just lay out the batting to be about the same size as the quilt bottom. So that's the one that goes in between the middle of the sandwich. And I'll spread this out. So I guess you can just watch me do that. And I'm working with a bigger piece of batting because I just got a new roll in. But you can also patch batting together. My daughter will. You can also patch batting together. So if you have, like, from this, I'm gonna cut off a good portion of this. I'm not gonna throw that away. This is really nice organic batting, and I'm gonna use it. So I'm gonna try to make, you know, the pieces that I cut off to be as big as they can be, but then I can sew these together later to make a bigger piece. And so I'm just gonna push all these wrinkles out, and it's weirdly satisfying. And again, not one for perfection here. We're having fun, creating art. Don't think art has to always be so serious. We are also joyful people. So I feel like art can be fun and be joyful. Okay, so let me give you a closer look. Okay, that's it all laid out, and I'm going to trim it down real quick with a pair of fabric scissors. Okay, that's what it looks like trimmed up. And the batting will just stick onto your quilt back, so yeah, you don't need to tape it down or anything like that. It'll just stay in place. Let's move on to the quilt. One more note on the batting: when you cut it down, so another way to do this is to just measure out your quilt back and roll out batting on like a cutting mat and do it there. This feels easier to me, so I do it this way. But one danger to this is you could cut your quilt top, and don't do that. I haven't done it yet, but it's like a nightmare of mine because you put them at like so much, or you could cut your quilt back, not your quilt top. But you just made it and it's beautiful and you want it on a quilt and then you cut into it. That would be a bummer, so don't do that. Now the quilt top is on, and you can see that it's the right side, the side you want to see, facing up. This part can kind of be tricky because you can't really see your quilt back, and so that if you need it to be centered, like if you need the center of your quilt top to be centered with the quilt back, that can be kind of tricky. I've done it before, and it usually doesn't come out perfectly. But like I said, I'm a lazy quilter. And good enough is good enough to a certain extent. You know what I mean? Anywho, so another thing you also want to watch out for is that the edges, the quilt top doesn't go over the quilt back edges. Hopefully you've made your quilt back a little bit bigger than your quilt top, and so it gives you a little room to play. But yeah, it would just be a shame to get it all basted and like this corner to be all wonky and it be off. And then you have to do it over again. And no one wants that. That leaves a very sad quilter. So at this point, you get to baste. And there's spray bastes out there. There's some different options like that. I haven't gotten into the spray basting because I know a lot of them have chemicals to it. I think you can make some like homemade spray basting stuff. So I don't know much about that. Maybe that's something to look into. But I just pin, and you can get these quilting pins that are bent. They have a bend to them, so that when you stick them into, can you see that? But they have a bend to them, so that you can kind of see it. I want this to work. Yeah? No? Anyway, so that when you stick it into the quilt, the pin pops right back up. That makes it easy and quick. So what I'll do is I'll put pins like, you know, within, I don't remember what the rule is, but within like 5-ish inches of one another. I don't even measure. I just kind of put them in a pattern where I want to. It holds the quilt together. I'll show you in a second what that looks like. Okie doke, so you can see pins probably more than 5 inches apart. I don't know, but it's gonna hold the quilt together. Cool, and that's what we want. You know, if you're machine quilting, you may need to do a better job basting. But I hand quilt and I can kind of smooth out the fabric as I go. It's just a slower process. And so I just am not that careful with my basting. So anyway, that's how I do it. Oh, and you'll want to peel the tape off your quilt before you try to get it off the floor. Anyway. My assistant. You leave that alone? You know. Can you help me pick up the quilt? So this is what it's going to look like on this side. And the quilt back. And because I have it basted, I can move it around and then I'll be able to hand quilt. So y'all get to it. I can't wait to see what you do. What do you have to say? Spray bottle is very important, huh? She might get a pay cut.